weather across the country, but let's bring some joy into this conversation today. So I'm going to ask Rizwana to start sharing our screen, and I'll tell you a little bit about the Muslim Women's Network UK and the project we're doing with the Fawcett Society. Rizwana, are you okay to share?
Yes.
Just put it onto slideshow. Yeah, great. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. The Muslim Women's Network UK is part of a coalition of women's organizations, a project called Equal Power. This is really about making sure that we have better diversity and more equal representation at every level of politics and public life. We've done a lot of work, a lot of sessions online recently around how to become an MP, how to become a councillor. Each of the partners is doing different aspects of this work with peer support sessions. So do check out the links in the chat. Rizwana will paste the links to the Equal Power website page, and you can check what other training we have coming up. Just a little bit about the Muslim Women's Network UK. So the Muslim Women's Network UK is a registered national charity. Ultimately, we're aiming to improve social justice and equality for Muslim women and girls. And the way we do that is research, advocacy, and campaigning. One of the key projects we work on is something called the Muslim Women's Network HELPLINE. So we set that up in 2015. And it's a national service, super busy right now with COVID, and ultimately take calls on a range of issues. But our top issues right now, I think will come as no surprise to any of you, are domestic abuse and mental health issues. So our calls on domestic abuse have gone up by 7% from last year. So we're now at 39% of our calls are related to domestic abuse. If you need any information, we have a separate website for that. Okay, in terms of one other thing that I'm going to share with you, we will be launching a member platform, an online member platform. The Muslim Women's Network has always been about connecting, women and those working with women, and we really wanted to do this. And I think, I'm holding back, but I'm super excited. Actually, this platform is really going to change the way that we interact with our members. There will be an MWN TV section, an article section, podcast. So definitely it will be launching in a couple of weeks. Check it out in a couple of weeks. And if you're interested in contributing, do get in touch. I know all of you here are doing super interesting things because I've checked out lots of profiles already. Okay, without further ado, Rizwana, I'm okay to stop, if you can stop sharing, please. I'm now going to pass on to our first speaker, who is Penny Wilson from Getting On Board. Penny has always worked and volunteered in the charity sector and started her career at the Association of Charity Shops and Barnet Voluntary Service Council. She went on to then be the head of the Community Affairs at the University of Cambridge, has done a whole host of other stuff in between, I know, then Director of Partnerships at the Brilliant Club, and became CEO of Getting On Board in 2018. I'm not going to tell you about her board work because I'm sure she's going to discuss that herself, but I'll hand over to Penny now.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm also a serial trustee, so I couldn't do my job without practicing what I preach. So I've been a trustee for 10 years of 4 different organisations, and I'm currently a trustee of the National Migraine Centre, and I'm pretty passionate about it, as you might gather as I go through my slides. So I'm going to talk about becoming a charity trustee. Of course, this isn't the only sort of board position. There are also positions on housing associations and public boards and voluntary organisations that aren't registered charities, and commercial boards and school boards and so on. But I'm going to focus on trusteeship. So do tell us in the chat, people were chatting whether they've been a board member or not before. Do tell us if we've got any trustees with us, whether you've been a trustee previously, or perhaps whether you are a trustee now. I'd love to hear. So what is a trustee and what's it all about? There are 700,000 trustees in England and Wales, and they are the backbone of the charity sector, and they are responsible for making sure basically that charities are well run. And of course, well-run charities really matter. They matter because of the role of charities in our society. And they matter particularly at the moment. Many charities, as Faisal was saying, are right at the coalface of the effects of COVID. So whether that's domestic violence, food banks, mental health, education, and so on. And it's tough for charities at the moment, as it is for many other sectors. So they've had about a 40% increase in demand combined with a 50% decrease in income. So tough times for charities. So 3/4 of charities say that they struggle to find the trustees that they need. And actually the main reason for that is that only 10% of trustee roles are ever advertised, which is actually a pretty unhelpful fact when you're sitting there as an aspiring trustee. And we'll come on to how to actually find a trustee position. And just a stat here to prove that this situation isn't working for anybody, only 14% of charities feel very well equipped to meet their challenges given who's on their board. So it doesn't work for aspiring trustees and it doesn't work for charities. And that's where you come in. We have really poor board diversity on our trustee boards. 2/3 of trustees are over 50. Only 36% of trustees are women, and people of colour make up only 8% of trustees compared to 14% of the wider population. But actually, anybody aged over 16 or 18, depending on the charity structure, can be a trustee. And there's very, very few exceptions to that. There's some really minor legal exceptions that affect a tiny minority of the population. For everybody else, you can absolutely become a trustee. This is an opportunity that's open to you. Would anybody like to hazard a guess at what 168,000 is? What is that the number of? Type it in the chat. What's 168,000? And while you're typing, I'll tell you that 950,000, yes, thank you, Sarah. It is the number of charities in England and Wales. So the number of registered charities, and Mandy as well, registered charities in England and Wales. And there are many more charitable organisations, but they're the registered charities. 950 is the number of trusteeships, and 700,000 people hold those trusteeships. So 1/4 of trustees are trustees in more than one charity. 2,000 is the number of trustees appointed on average every week. So there are 90,000 trustee vacancies in England and Wales. And that's mirrored across Scotland and Northern Ireland. So the opportunity is huge. And of course, charities are literally everywhere. They come in all shapes and sizes. And the causes are so varied that there is a cause for everybody to feel passionate about. So whether that's arts and culture or heritage or climate change or animals or education or social inclusion or health or cancer or children in care and so on and so forth, the range of charities is absolutely mind-boggling. So, and Tahira says getting on is the hard part. Do you mean getting on a board, Tahira? Just tell us it in the chat. So let's just quickly touch on what a trustee is. You're basically an unpaid committee member of a charity. There are really minor exceptions to the unpaid bit, but the vast majority of trustees are unpaid. And this jigsaw piece comes from the Charity Commission for England and Wales, all of the regulators, so Oscar in Scotland, Charity Commission for England and Wales, Charity Commission for Northern Ireland, they all have really useful guidance on what the role is. So if you're interested, I definitely recommend you have a look there. So just to pick off a couple of these pieces, you're there to ensure your charity is carrying out its purposes for the public benefit. So every charity has its objects registered with the Charity Commission, so what it's there to do. So for example, you might join a charity and it's there to support, I don't know, people with dementia in Greater Manchester. So as a trustee, you have to make sure that that is what every single thing your charity does is within the frame of those objects. So just to pick up another couple of these, you're there to manage your charity's resources responsibly. This can be a hard one to get your head around if you don't already work in the charity sector, because for charities, money is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. So we want money so that we can deliver charitable services, but equally most charities struggle to get enough money, but equally we're not there to raise loads of money and sit on it and not spend it. Absolutely, we've got to spend it on doing the good things that we're doing. And then finally, I'm just going to pick on the one that says act with reasonable care and skill, because this is really important to aspiring trustees. The Charity Commission doesn't expect you to be an expert in every aspect of charity governance. It doesn't expect you to understand the law inside out. It does expect you to turn up in every sense of the word. It does expect you to understand the charity, and it does expect you to use your noddle, use your common sense. And to bring in external expertise if you've got a really important decision to make that you feel as a group of trustees that you can't make. So why do people want to be trustees? I see that in the chat we've got some people that are already trustees. Perhaps some of you are interested. Tell us, what is it about becoming a trustee that's motivating you? And while you're doing that, I'll say that the most common reason we're here is that people want to give back. And it sounds cheesy, but it's absolutely true, isn't it? As humans, we want to give back to our communities or to a cause that we feel really passionate about. And I think this links absolutely directly to this 84% of trustees it makes them feel happier. And that mental health boost of actually doing something voluntarily that you're really passionate about. A couple of people have said using their skills, develop me at management levels. Absolutely. And 96% of trustees in our research said they'd learnt new skills. And that often isn't the prime motivation for becoming a trustee, but the vast majority of trustees do learn new skills. And I think that's often, you know, in our day jobs, we might be marketing buffs or finance people or fundraisers. And then we get on a charity board and actually we're overseeing all of these different skills, whether it's finance, safeguarding, fundraising, premises, HR, marketing. So you're exposed to many, many more skills than you might be in your day job. Some people tell us as well that they just really like the idea of being in charge. That's quite a common one that we hear. If you're still junior in your career, the fact that you're in charge of a charity with your fellow trustees is a pretty wonderful feeling. So how do you actually get a role? Here are some links. You're going to be sent these afterwards. You can simply do a Google search and that should pick up the Google job search as long as you're not too specific. So for example, you can say trustee jobs Wales or trustee jobs Cardiff and it'll work. If you say trustee jobs Poorly Dogs Bolton, it's probably too specific and it won't work. And then there's a series of websites here that advertise trustee vacancies. However, as I said before, only 10% of vacancies are ever advertised, and that gives you two problems. One is that you might not know about the vacancies, and two, and somebody's already commented on this, they're very skewed towards national charities, so they can be harder to secure. So you can just approach a charity totally speculatively and cold, either a charity that you already know, a charity you find on Google, or you can go to your regulator, depending on where you are in the UK, and you'll find that every single registered charity has an entry on the Charity Commission websites, and you can search by various criteria to find those. So to wrap up, you can connect with Getting On Board. We send vacancies out every day. Here's all our social links. We also have workshops and programs, but actually you don't need to come through Getting On Board. And I guess my closing message is, if you fancy being a trustee, just do it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Penny, and also a huge thanks for sticking to time. This is brilliant to start with, so well done. I mean, so much to think about already. Like Penny said, you know, we've shared some links in the chat and we'll definitely be sending you those links afterwards too. Okay, let's move on to our next speaker, who is Jess Stockford from Prospectus. And Jess is a consultant with over 20 years of expertise in business partnerships, governance, and fundraising across the cultural, social enterprise, and beyond profit sectors. She's passionate about leadership, governance, and building better boards, and has supported making hundreds of chair and non-exec appointments for a whole range of organizations and charities, and also is, you know, has been on a number of boards and is on boards too. So I'm sure she'll share some of that. So over to you, Jess.
Thanks so much, Faiza, and thanks very much for inviting me to speak today. I think the work that Equal Power is doing is really, really important. And a huge thank you to Penny for landing such a brilliant overview of the purpose of charities, why people join. And thank you very, very much indeed for making that. I hope that's going to be helpful for myself and for Simon too. And I hope that you come away today from this session feeling encouraged, supported, confident about your stepping into a trustee role yourself. I think everyone here today would want you to feel like that, and also in possession of some practical tips and next steps. I think the thing that I'd like to sort of give an overview of, as well as a headhunter, and I lead a practice for a recruitment agency called Prospectus, and we specialise in governance appointments, largely within the beyond profit sector. Now, one of the really interesting facts that Penny gave was that only 10% of those roles are advertised, and we probably do work in those roles. And I think that what I want to do is really encourage you to connect with organisations like us, but also with some of the other infrastructure organisations, and to work under your own steam too. I know that there are, Equal Power is looking at civic roles, you know, public roles in public office, roles in public life, being a magistrate. And I think that actually board roles and trustee roles are a really important gateway into this area of power, because as many of you will know, in you know, it wasn't very long ago that lots of publicly appointed roles were just a tap on the shoulder. You know, people were appointed to boards because of who they knew and other relationships. And I think one of the things that we've seen a huge rise in is much more transparent and open and accessible board recruitment and appointments. There's obviously the Commission of Public Appointments that exists to make all those big government appointments, and it's really important that those bodies exist. And often those appointments are competitive. It's important for you to understand that too. But I think one of the things I want to pick up is how, as a headhunter and a recruiter, we can support you, we can pass on some of our insights. The things that I think can be really challenging about how to find out about board roles, how to be successful, how to step into that kind of mindset. And I think first of all, it's something about removing some of those barriers and identifying yourself as a prospective trustee or wanting to join another board. And out of those 168,000 charities, only a small amount of them will recruit openly. I think one of the important things that we would want to talk about is how you start to reframe your skills, how you think about yourself in relation to your experience, your passions, your professional expertise, or any other work that you've done voluntarily. And then really start to think about your relationships with your community around you, with your local environment, with projects, people, purpose, mission that you're already passionate about. And I would echo what Penny has said about making some of those first steps yourself. I would also think about checking out with the charity governance code about the expectations of being a charity trustee. And I think thinking really carefully about the time that you can offer, think about what might be expected of your time. Are board meetings in the evening? Are they during the day? Can you get support? And most good charities will pay for things like childcare and travel and reimburse those kind of expenses. So again, keep thinking. I know it's easy to think about the things that might stop you being a trustee, but I want to remove those. I want you to think about peeling those things away. I think increasingly for boards, And certainly this year we have seen a really, really large uptake in boards actively wanting to search for new trustees, thinking about sustainability, thinking about how to be effective in a kind of post-COVID environment. And I think that there's something really interesting about how, and Louise, I'm seeing your note about transparency and white men from a certain educational background. I think that's a really valuable point. Thinking about how you start to position your skills and expertise. One of the other things I wanted to talk about is how, as headhunters, we can be helpful to you. As you, Simon, my colleague from Odgers, Berndtson, and my colleagues who are here today, Lottie and Camille, who work alongside me in the board appointments team. We obviously only, work on maybe 50 or 60 or 70 roles a year, but we also we want to talk to you. We want to be able to have access to fantastic candidates in waiting. So we're really happy to look at CVs, to think about how you present yourself as a potential candidate. And a lot of the time our clients are looking for particular skill set. Obviously those very obvious professional roles like legal and HR and finance and safeguarding and risk and so on. But increasingly the value of trustees with lived experience who are really important in the mix for charities. I think it's very important that we can speak to you as if you want to be just a general trustee, maybe if you don't identify yourself with one of those particular skill sets. And I think increasingly grassroots relationships with community leaders, with activists, it's really, really important for the charities that we work with. Just to think a little bit about some of the organisations that we're involved with. We work a lot with to champion and remove barriers to people who might often experience barriers to joining a board. So younger people, women, Black, Asian and minority ethnic candidates who may typically not be better represented at board level, which we know very clearly about, and post Black Lives Matter, this is a huge issue for the charity sector. And there's a really interesting advocacy organisation called Charity So White, which has been doing a lot of really, really important work in calling out and in really shining a really important spotlight on how charities need to do much better in this space. We work with organisations at a really hyper-local level and at a global level. So one moment we might be recruiting a new chair for the Board of Citizens Advice in Lewisham, and the next minute we might be recruiting female finance ministers from Africa from African countries. So we work in a very, very bifocal way. We really want to get to know our communities. We really want to get to know different groups. And what I would say, I think, about the way that we work is that we have a really important role. And I know that Simon and Penny and other organisations that are part of the infrastructure have a really important job to do in opening up the pipeline and removing those barriers, in making people feel really comfortable and confident about moving into these roles. And I would like to encourage all of you to do that today. So I think if I can, say 5 things that you ought to be doing, is making sure that you're clear about the purpose of a charity and what the expectation might be of you, thinking about your time and your availability, thinking about what matters to you, where you want to contribute your energy, your focus, your passion. Think about what you'd like to learn as well. This is a two-way street. And there needs to be a sense that you're learning as well. Thinking about the chemistry, the fit, that you feel within the organisation, and then really thinking about your skills and expertise and how you can make a brilliant contribution. I also think it's really important to enjoy and have fun in your board role. I think it's a massive part of unlocking your ability to be a successful trustee, because you're enjoying it, and you're not dreading going to board meetings. So I do think that making sure that you identify an organisation where you can bring your whole self into the mix is really important. I think I'm just at time now, so I'm going to say thank you very much. We would love to hear from you. I know that Simon and Penny and my colleagues Lottie and Camille will be really pleased to take any queries from you later on, and I'm on LinkedIn and be really pleased to connect with you. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jess. And I think that's really given us, a lot to think about. And I'm going to move swiftly on, because what I'm trying to do is just allow us a little more time in the question and answer session. So, for those of you who are already getting questions, feel free to add it to the chat, and I'll keep an eye on it. And then we'll try and group them together so we get as many answered as possible. So our next speaker is Simon McDonald. Simon began his career in the public sector before working in management consultancy, and has worked in executive recruitment since 2007. He is now a partner at Odgers Berndtson London, in the London office, and leads the government practice. His focus is on recruiting non-exec and senior exec roles in government departments, agencies, and other public bodies. And just from the examples that Simon, you shared with me, I know you've got such a wealth and breadth of experience in consultancy, and perhaps you can share some of those with our group today. I'm going to hand over to you now, Simon, and we'll pick it back up as a group if there's any particular questions that you have for anyone.
Liza, thank you very much. Thank you for putting up a picture of me wearing a suit. It reminds me of what I looked like 7 months ago. Not something I've worn for some time. I'm very grateful for you for inviting me today. I'm also very grateful to Penny and Jess. The advantage of being the third person is that I think they've already done the heavy lifting. The good news is that I don't have anything to say that would particularly disagree with them. I think in many ways I'll be reinforcing some of the points that they've made. And I'm also just remembering your injunction to me to speak a bit slower. So I'll do my best for the caption people. One of the things I think I particularly would agree with Jess is that the process of appointing people to boards, and all the work I do is with government boards, so it's a slightly different perspective. I'm a public appointments person. It's all I do is recruit people to public bodies into non-executive roles, and I've seen a real difference over certainly over the last 2 or 3 years, where the process has become more open, has become more accessible. And actually, we now have clients who are judging the success of diversity in recruitment by more than a gender count. So there's something here about it's becoming more sophisticated, and people are showing greater understanding of what diversity in public appointments means. And it's really important, because I forget who just mentioned the white men with a certain educational background. Thank you, Louisa. But it's really important to us that our public bodies, which are instrumental in so many parts of our everyday lives, are not just a bunch of old Etonians sitting on a board scrutinising old Etonians who are on the executive committee, working to the policies of old Etonians in government. We need that breadth. We really need the whole of our society represented across these boards. And I think we have a greater chance of achieving it now. So I'm looking to take just a few minutes really addressing Tyra's point that getting on in the first place is the hardest part. And what I wanted to do, perhaps building on Penny and Jess, is talk about what I see and what I look for as a headhunter when I sit there with a pile of applications in front of me. And the things that I think can help give you, even if it's a couple of %, give that extra edge to the process of applying. So we'll be judging against person specifications and selection criteria and a whole load of things, but there are two fundamental questions that I'm interested in. The first question, and they're both simple questions. The first one is, can this applicant do this job? So it's really beholden on people applying for a role to demonstrate that they can do it. And I'll come back to what I mean by that in a moment. And the second question is, can they get this job? And both of these matter. We have a lot of really, really good, talented people applying for roles for which they're never going to get appointed. I've just recruited non-executives to Ofwat, the water regulator. And we were very clear that we needed somebody who specialised in consumer advocacy, and we needed somebody who was in Wales and could represent the interests of Welsh people whose water is regulated. And I've spent days after the process giving feedback to people that you neither have the experience of consumer advocacy, nor are you Welsh, or from Wales, or living in Wales, or connected to Wales. So I think those two tests are really important. Do you have what we're looking for in terms of being able to do it? And do you pass those essential criteria? In looking at those, in looking at whether to apply for a job and asking that, I think the key questions I also have 5 points like Jess. I think the first of these is, and again, Jess's point, just ask yourself, is this something you really care about? Because we're going to get to this at some point, either looking at the application or later on in an interview. And the people who don't really care, people who are looking to add to a portfolio or looking to sort of maybe build status, it comes through at some point. We're looking for authenticity here. We're looking at what's the value you're going to bring over 3, 4, 5 years. So go for the things that matter to you. And by the way, that's a great way then of framing the application that you make. Do the research. Make sure that as you're applying, you understand the organization that you're actually applying for. Lots of people give us very generic applications. Lots of people, I'm afraid, send in to us the same application, the same covering letter that they may have done for another 2 or 3 or 5 or 20 applications. Do the research and make sure that you're relating yourself to the organization that you're applying for. Another golden rule, I would say, if there's a headhunter involved, and quite often there won't be, but if there's a headhunter involved, phone them up. Talk to them. We get paid for this, okay? Make us earn our money. Phone up and ask about what's the client really looking for, what are the key things that they would need to achieve on the board. I love getting phone calls from potential candidates where we can then perhaps give a bit more insight and a bit more help, or occasionally say to people, do you know what? I can't see anything here that suggests that you're going to have that connection with Wales. So it's going to be a real stretch, given that they're asking for somebody to represent the interests of Welsh people. So I use that as an example, but there'll be many. But call them up, talk to them. If you've got a headhunter that really doesn't want to talk to you, you're talking to a lousy headhunter. We are always interested in gaining more information and more insight into potential candidates. And make your application about them. Make sure that that people can see your references to them. There's an emotional connection that you can get even across a written page if people think you want to join them rather than think that you want to join an organization, that you want just another role. And the thing, going back to Tyra's point, getting on to the hard part, you have to help us in breaking that vicious circle, which starts with the board saying, bring us people, bring us a diverse range of candidates, and then giving us some very narrow specifications, and then ruling out anybody that doesn't have a set of experience that goes perhaps with having been encouraged 30 years ago to take STEM subjects at school, or people who have had beneficial run in their executive career. So we really need people to be saying, on my CV, I have done this, and it gives me the ability to meet these criteria. Help us to understand it, help us to advocate for you when we're talking to our clients about why they should give you an interview. there are different views on CVs and the length of CVs. I'm relatively agnostic. Don't make it so long, unless you're applying for an academic role with all your publications, don't make it so long that it's going to take us absolutely ages to read it. But do make it long enough to actually get the detail in so we can understand what you've done. And my golden rules for covering letter, others will differ, but my rules, the first thing is, give us a paragraph that tells us what the experience is that you'll draw on and the relevance to this role. Help us to understand why the CV is equipping you to come and take this on. Give us a paragraph on what you offer. What's the value the organisation is going to get from your presence, from you being there? How do you see yourself contributing on the board of this particular organisation? And it really helps if you take a look at who else is on that board and think, where are the gaps? What do they really need? Do I fill that gap? If you're an accountant and they've already got a chair of audit committee and the chair is an accountant, they probably don't want another accountant. But it may be that there's something else that you're bringing in terms of your experience. And draw on life experience, not just professional experience. Tell us what is it that you're bringing to this board. And tell us why you really want it. Back to Jess's point about passion. People love to know that you want to join their organisation, not just that you're looking for any role. And my last point, I'm mindful, Pfizer, of keeping an eye on the clock. In terms of your visibility, social media, I think, is still at the moment, in my judgment, a little more powerful for executive roles than for non-executive roles. It's less used in searching for people because it's less effective. The thing that will drive you to the top of lists on LinkedIn is content. So not simply putting up a CV and ticking a box saying I'm looking for a place on a board, and by all means do that. But if you start joining in the discussions about the topics that you're more passionate about, that's where people will go and find you. So drive it by content. Keep your social media and your Twitter feeds constructive. We do check them. The appointments that I do going onto government boards are often then go into ministerial offices and are checked over by special advisors. We're not seeing people who are kicked out because they hold a particular political perspective most of the time. I've just put 2 former Labour MPs onto public bodies under a Conservative government. But if you are a sort of Twitter warrior, if you are being abusive to people, if I'm sure no one here is, but that if you're doing those things, they will be found and they will rule you out. So remember that your social media is a bit of a gateway into understanding about you. So do please hold those in mind. And finally, I would absolutely reiterate Jess's point. We would love to have your CVs. We would love to know more about you. So Pfizer has all my contact details, and I'm sure we'll share them after this. If you email me, I'll respond to you. If you send me a CV, it'll go on our database and we'll use it. If you give me a phone call, I'll talk to you. We're very, very happy to offer any support that we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was super helpful and practical. I think we've managed to get some really good tips from all the speakers. Just, I really enjoyed kind of the covering letter perspective, specifically, and even just the practical elements about CVs. I think it's really useful to hear that. And as someone who's just gone through 320 applications for a caseworker role we had advertised, I know by the 200th application, you're definitely looking at each application a little bit differently than you did the first 10. So even with, an interview grid and the rest. So I think, as that's definitely taught me how to be a bit more mindful about what's on my CV and on my cover letter too. So I'm gonna open up the chat for specific questions that any of you may have. And also for Simon, Jess and Penny, while people are submitting their questions, is there anything you would like to know from this audience? So maybe it's about barriers that they may have faced or are facing, or some of the challenges that they're experiencing. Now's a good time to ask those questions. Penny, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I can see already in the chat that some people have have not managed to get a role and want a role, it would be brilliant to hear more about those experiences. What stage did you not manage to get through? Did you get any feedback? What did you particularly struggle with? And I know in the chat we've already had some comments about representing career breaks, and what do you do if the advert's asking for a certain really narrow set of skills and that perhaps you don't have?
Okay, so I will take two participant experiences just in the interest of time. So I'll come to you first, Louisa, if you can unmute and tell us what your experience has been. And if someone else lets me know if they would like to also share.
Well, I did a lot of research for the Criminal Justice Board in David Powys when they were setting up the Independent Advisory Group way back in 2000 after the Macpherson report. But I'm also interested in politics. I'm a researcher, and my current passion now, Simon, I'm coming to you, is about water. I've been documenting, taking photographs, and I was hoping to return to university to do a master's in research about water in Wales. I live in Mid Wales, in Bills, and I photographed the Ellen Valley. I took photograph, walked where you would never, even got lost my trainers in the mud and walked bare feet. But the damage, and I live in Billswells, and I have seen the devastation that the floodings cause. And this is my passion about water and how it relates to the landscape, to farmland, and what's happening, because it affects everyone, you know. And so that's my passion and interest, but still also on equality and all that, because water is a vital, is vital for human life. We all need that water to survive.
Louisa, I'm going to stop you there. Tell me, have you looked at specific roles and tried to apply for them recently?
I haven't, because I haven't seen any. I hadn't thought of applying for any. And I wish I'd seen Simon's. So I'll send you my CV, Simon.
Yeah. No, well, this is why we're here. And I think the point about, you know, that basically only 10% are advertised, 90% are not, right? So I don't know if any of the speakers can kind of answer some of that. Like, how do you get to know? I know using, you know, recruitment consultants is an obvious response, and not many people do that. But is there anything else that we can do, you know, if you have a particular area of interest, to make yourself known within particular networks?
So, I mean, I think go to the Charity Commission website and you can do a keyword search, you can filter things down, so you can literally put in the word water and see what charities are working in that area. I mean, this is just trusteeships. Obviously, there are other kinds of boards as well, and then make some cold approaches.
Yeah. So even if they aren't being advertised, any roles that are being advertised. Okay, great tip. Jess, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'd add to Penny's comment. And actually, I think if there are organisations that you're interested in, and they don't have obvious a board vacancy, I think it's worth creating a relationship, and that might be through a volunteering opportunity to begin with. It could be a piece of work that you do to support that organisation. Getting to know them and getting in front of them can be really helpful, so that you also get insights into how the culture of the organisation, how it works. And actually, there might be an organisation that on the surface of it you think is perfect, but actually taking a kind of a lifting up the bonnet of it makes you think, gosh, I'm not sure, you know, it's the right organisation for me to be involved with. I think the kind of the chemistry and the you know, doing an MOT on organisations and your due diligence is also really important, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a trustee, whether you're a potential employee. So I think, yeah, the due diligence that you do on organisations is also really important.
Yeah, and I think in the chat we had some conversation around financial liability, and hopefully you've got some information you know, as a group from there. And I'll definitely send out some, definitely check out the charities or the people that you're applying to, look at Companies House on the Charity Commission website, and check, you know, are they filing their account, and look at the account also, actually, would be my advice too. Okay, we've had another question. And I just want to double check I haven't missed the second experience in case anyone wanted to share. No, I haven't. Okay, so we've had a question from Connie, which I've now lost. Connie, where are you gone? There you are. Is about roles that are advertised and the language that is used within the descriptions for those roles, particularly asking for things like experience or senior leaders, and how does that fare for younger applicants? And how do you overcome that, I guess? Simon, go ahead.
So, so I think it varies enormously across different organisations. There are some where they will need, actually really will need very detailed technical understanding. If you're going on to the determination committee of a regulatory body, for example, you may well need senior level experience in that particular discipline. But there's a whole bunch where the role is governance rather than performing a specialist function. And what's really important about those is being able to present an argument about the experience that you can bring to that board and your ability to participate. So I think sometimes you have to kind of almost ride over the criteria that are put down. I have seen people make appointments of really good people onto boards where they've decided, okay, we have person specification that says this, but this person is bringing in some experience that we simply don't have. I'll give you an example. I did the money advice service. It doesn't exist anymore. And they were looking for people who had experience of financial services, but they ended up taking a lawyer who worked for the Glasgow Govan Law Centre dealing with people in enduring poverty, and the woman who had worked in pawn shops, because pawnbrokers shops, because again, people who run into financial difficulties, you're really poor if you're pawning a wedding ring or your mother's jewelry or something. And they didn't meet the initial criteria, but they were taken additionally to two people, but they brought a sort of a range of life experience and understanding that others don't have. And so I would support the comment that just came through in the chat, where somebody said, and I think this is right, by the way, that women are less likely to apply for something if they don't meet all the criteria. Men are more likely to take a look at it and say, well, I'm close enough, I'll have a go. If you think you meet enough to contribute to that board, give them a call, drop a note to the chair, put an application in, but you know, if you're not in, you're not going to get on.
Jess, I could see you nodding away. Go ahead.
Simon, obviously we work in a very similar space, and I find this a lot, that very often men put themselves forward for roles that they are not particularly well, closely qualified for, and women tend to give things much greater consideration. I did a search recently for a very large airborne charity where we were looking for clinical trustees, and it was so we were reaching out to consultants and medical professionals at kind of a very senior level, and all the men we approached said, yes, of course I can do this, it's absolutely fine, I can build it in. And many of the women that we reached out to said, I'm not sure I can combine that with my full-time job, my commitment as a parent, and my other responsibilities. And I think there's a whole thing about stepping out of that, and so we did a lot of work saying, no, come in, we can make this work. And I think good headhunters like Simon's firm and Prospectus will do that, and actually will say, might not take no for an answer, to say, come on, you can do this.
Okay, I want to come, thank you so much, Jess. I want to come to Georgina's point around, especially now in light of you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, I mean, the need for diversity has been there for decades, right? We know that, but it's ever more important now. But there is still a question of, and concern that often we have from members around not wanting to just be the tick box, right? And taking on a role or where actually you are adding value and you are supported, and actually your minority voice is supported and welcomed. So are things changing? Are you seeing a change and a shift with the companies that you work with the charities that you work with? And I guess, so are you seeing that change, and how can we add to that? How can we support changes? I don't know which speaker wants to go. Jess, do you want to go?
I'm happy to pitch in for a bit. Around 20% of the placements that we make are people who identify themselves as Black, Asian, or minority ethnic, according to our diversity monitoring.
Yeah.
And I think we have a job to do. We have a responsibility as a headhunter to challenge not just the scope of a search and the person specification, but actually the existing status quo within an organisation, to say, how will you support when somebody might come in and feel very othered in an environment where there is an exclusively white middle class board, and I think it's a really big deal, and I think it's really important for organisations to think about everything from the language that they use, the assumptions that they make, the way that all of the unconscious bias that happens, and that we have to kind of almost reset and be aware of. So I think that's also part of work that we do around supporting new people onto boards, making sure that people are, there's a real understanding and an awareness of what those systems and structures look like and how it might feel to come into that. So I think it's not just going out and making it an inclusive and diverse and equitable search. It's about what's happening back in the organisation too.
Penny, Simon, do you want to add anything? Or I'm happy to go to the next question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think this is such an important question, Georgina, and we've done research into the experiences of new trustees, and we heard loud and clear that the experience isn't always positive. And I want to be completely honest about that. We're not here to pull the wool over your eyes. So most trustees go onto boards, feel that they're really contributing, and that it's a positive experience. But some trustees feel that they go onto a board and they're simply not listened to. They're there for the wrong reason, whether that's because the board's decided they need somebody who isn't white, somebody who's a woman, somebody who's a bit younger. And clearly that's a personally a really terrible place to be in. And I think there are things, we don't want all the burden to be on you, which is why people, that's why Getting on Board and Prospectus and others are trying to do things from the other end of the lens on the charity side to cause change to happen there. But as a potential trustee from your end, I think, there are red flags that you can try to pick up about, in the interview process. Do you feel that there's a genuinely good conversation about how you're going to help, about what are they interested in? Are they genuinely interested in your perspective and your experience and your life experiences and your skills? You can often tell that they're not really that interested, even at interview stage.
I think both those comments are right. I think we may be finding ourselves in quite an interesting transitional stage where actually it's becoming easier for people who are not typically represented on boards to get onto boards. And I say easier, not easy. It's still, if you look at public appointments, the vast majority, actually they're about 50-50 on gender, but the vast majority are still white people, disproportionately large number. But I think we are seeing a greater desire from our clients to bring them a diverse shortlist. I had one search recently which took place right in the middle of some of the Black Lives Matter protests, and the board, the selection panel was, in my view, heading towards a fairly traditional looking appointment, and then the chair addressed a whole company meeting about sort of their future strategy. Got a lot of Black Lives Matter related questions, including, you've got an all-white board and you're recruiting at the moment, what are you doing about it? And came back to us and said, actually, we need to shift the way that we're looking at this. We went and found new candidates. They've appointed 4 people, 2 of whom are BAME. So I think it's shifting, but are those people ticking boxes? They might be. But what it's also doing is diversifying that board and shifting the dynamic and taking us forward into what I hope will be a better place.
Okay, Penny, from you.
Somebody said in the comment about recruiting for fit. I can't find it now, but that's such a good point, because part of the problem here is that, you know, trustees are there to disagree with each other constructively. You know, good governance, a good diverse board should be debating all the different angles, bringing different perspectives, like pleasantly disagreeing with each other. And actually, that's not what a lot of charities are doing. A lot of them are recruiting for fit, which means recruiting people like them. And that's part of the massive shift that needs to happen in our sector that will have a huge knock-on effect for potential trustees.
Go on, Jess.
Really quickly, Penny. Yeah, I think fit is dangerous, and I think I did mention it in my when I was speaking earlier. And I think what I would say about fit is the type of organisation, its values. So the values and the behaviours are the things that need to feel right for you. And actually the behaviours of the board and the behaviours of the organisation, how they're embodied, is about what needs to feel right. And believe me, sometimes they can be really incongruent, actually, between the board and the organisation. I think a really interesting follow-up from the diversity discussion. So my colleague Camille and I are leading a search for a new treasurer for Stonewall, the human rights charity. We're about to go live with that, and we are. And one of the conversations that we will be having with all of the candidates we speak to is about privilege and what they understand privilege to mean as a candidate. And we also will be reaching out to people with, for example, with trans lived experience, and making very, very deep connections with that community, which we've done in the past. So I think there's a lot of nuance sometimes in, board members being very aware of what that might mean around a board. So yeah, just to give an example of some of that in action and in practice.
Thank you so much. I think we have had a great hour and we're about to sign off. And I just wanted to say thank you again to all the speakers and to the participants and to all the questions and the discussion that we've just had. I think it's super, super helpful to have professionals like yourself sharing and kind of demystifying or mystifying what the process is, because sometimes I think we put up the barriers ourselves. So my message to all of you who are considering a board role today is just go for it. Get involved, have the conversations with the people who are recruiting, whether that's the charities themselves, the boards themselves, or the recruitment agents. Like Simon has said, this is what they get paid for. So pick up the phone, speak to them, find out whether the organization or charity or company is right for you and where you can add value. And if we can help as the Muslim Women's Network, we definitely will, and we'll send out all the links that were spoken about today. I just want to do a final plug on the Equal Power project. This is the project which is funded by Comic Relief. We have a whole host of new events which are coming up, being released next week actually, but here are some around political participation from our partners. So definitely, if you're interested in political roles, do get involved, attend these sessions, and hopefully you'll come away with a whole load of information and practical steps of taking your next step to political engagement. So thank you very much. I'm going to end there, and thank you to all the participants. Take care and have a good day.